So, you are Nicholas Cups,
Mm-hmm.
but you have a nickname.
Oh, Jesus.
So do you always go by Nicholas, or do you go by Nick? What do your friends call you?
Friends call me Nick.
Okay.
Because my last name is Cups. Professionally, I go by Nicholas.
Got it.
Because Nick Cups turns into Nickups. Like, it's just hard to say. It's two hard C's together. And so you have to pause. Nick Cups.
Does your wife ever get the Nickups?
No. It like no one's ever called me that, but it's just one of those, like when you're introducing yourself, it sounds awkward. Mm-hmm. And so I just introduce myself to people out professionally or networking. My name's Nicholas.
Yeah.
It's kind of my work persona.
Okay.
But no one calls me that outside of, I mean, half my clients call me Nick, like once they got to know me. Mm-hmm. There are some who believe that, like, don't call that guy Nick, he's Nicholas. Like, because I'm like,
some people are pretty particular.
And I appreciate it. When I introduce myself as Nicholas, one of the things I hate most is when I'm like, hi, I'm Nicholas Cups. Like, oh, hi, Nick, I'm so-and-so.
They just assume.
I did not introduce myself that way. You're not listening. It's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
Like, we can get to the Nick thing later, but like, it's like, you know, hi, my name's Scott. Oh, hey, John. That's not the same name.
Or Sk.
Hey, Ott, how are you?
Yeah. So I'm glad we cleared that up, because I've been wanting to call you Nick for the longest time. I swear somewhere along the way is probably Don or someone referred to you as Nick, but I never saw your name printed out as Nick. So I think I even emailed you one time, Nick. And then I was like, oh, did I imagine that? And so from now on, I'm in the friend zone.
Sure. You can be in the friend zone or the business zone.
I will introduce you to people as Nicholas, but when I call you,
once
on the
I get
phone,
to know
Nick.
you, if you get to the next stage, then we're friends.
Are we at the next stage?
We are.
Okay, good. Okay, didn't want to overstep.
You can call me Nick throughout this interview. It's totally fine.
All right, cool. But for my guests to know, you're Nicholas Cups. You have the Nicholas Cups Show, a podcast where you interview, as I understand it, mostly entrepreneurs. It's sort of like the theme of it is breaking free from the mundane and the kind of the status quo. I know I'm like extrapolating a lot, but is that pretty close? How would you describe it?
Well, it's deeper than that. So the idea is rooted around my theme of how I define retirement. So retirement is not the traditional way you would define retirement of, I got to save a lot of money so I don't have to work someday. Because the assumption there is you probably don't like what you do. So mine is retirement is the day, the moment you stop sacrificing some imaginary tomorrow. You start sacrificing today for some imaginary tomorrow.
That's good.
And so from that comes this, there's a bunch of ways to do that. It can be the traditional way, work for a company your whole life, save into your 401k, have this big nut that then generates income and you can stop working. If that's your dream, wonderful. The people that I have on my show are ones that have found they can have their cake and eat it too by leaving the what everyone calls the rat race, you know, leaving your cubicle job, leaving that being an employee and going out on your own, starting your own business, which is usually chasing after a passion or a dream of yours, and then learning, looking backwards, work is very different when it's for yourself than it is for someone else. The rewards are better. Sometimes you can make more money. Sometimes you make less money. It doesn't matter. It's not about money anymore. It's about people that work for someone are sacrificing their freedom for money and are risking or basically sacrificing their and people that are self-employed are risking money for freedom. So that it's a totally different mindset. And everyone I've talked to who is self-employed will never go back to being an employee because they understand that it's the grass is truly greener. For those people.
Sure.
They're just destined to do that. And they then say, well, I kind of feel like I'm retired now. Like retirement isn't about not working. It's about enjoying life. Yeah, you can have enough passive income to support not needing to earn money. So you could serve on charities, you could donate your time, whatever it is, whatever your passion is. There isn't a universal thing for that. But my theme is that how I define retirement is very different. So the idea of the podcast is to celebrate those people, to inspire people who are sitting in their cubicle listening to podcasts while they're pretending to work, to say, oh, I've always wanted to be a business coach. Like I listened to Scott's, and wow, he took a very unconventional journey to that. But he made it sound like I could do it. And so you may have inspired someone to try that. And so I try to interview as many people from all different walks of life so that's a very long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, I love it. I love that. And by the way, if you don't know, Nicholas Cup show, I was a guest on, and that's what Nick's just referring to there.
Yeah.
Told my life story. 2 hours later, we passed out from exhaustion.
Well, that's what's great about long form podcasts is the everyone, when we're done, because the computer goes off and there's no clocks in here. I'm wearing a watch, but I usually don't, just because I don't want to know the time. And you get done, you click stop, and you're like, that we talked for 2.5 hours. Like that was 2.5 hours, and you just don't realize it, how much time flies when you're not distracted and you're kind of wired in, and it's all just this. That's what's great.
And hopefully the story's inspiring. So if you haven't seen it already or heard it, go to Nicholas Cup Show anywhere you can find a podcast. And look for my episode, because I want my episode to be number 1 on your show.
You're creeping up there. You've got some reach. So I think you're still number 2.
Yeah.
But I think you're episode 6.
I think so.
Yeah. So
look for episode number 6 and listen to it 50 times so I could be number 1 on that show.
Right.
Not that that's important.
Right.
You're married. You are married to Jenny. You've been married. It'll be 7 years this May.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. That's that's like that 7-year itch time where, it seems like there's some kind of, whether it's statistically proven or not, it seems like there's like a divorce threat there. So you're hitting that ceiling, hopefully breaking through onto year 8, and you don't have to worry about it for the rest of your life. You'll be divorce proof after year 7.
Oh, is that what it is?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's a fairy tale land. But
well, statistically, it probably the numbers go down, but statistics don't matter to the individual. So.
Exactly. You have 2 kids. You have a girl, 2.5 girl, and a 5-year-old boy.
Mm-hmm.
Good job.
I got my boy.
You produced. I
produced I've diversified my existence here.
Yeah.
Right.
And you are, so besides the podcast, you are also a financial advisor.
Mm-hmm.
That's your day job.
Right.
And I wanted to have you on the show because one, your husband on fire. Here we are, husband's talking, and you did me the solid of having me on your show, and so we got to know each other. And I would consider us friends. I hope we meet for lunch often.
Yes.
Going forward, and but also I appreciate your. As a financial advisor, I appreciate what you've already shared. Your look at retirement, how you view that. As an entrepreneur, I totally resonate with everything you were saying, and but also I think of you as an out of the box financial advisor. And I had a go at the financial world.
I think a lot of people have a go at the financial world.
So I dabbled in a past life. So I kind of know a portion of what in the box looks like. I was definitely sold hook, line, and sinker as a career path in the box view. But then I kind of broke out of that with some entrepreneurial juice that I just couldn't shake, right? So, which led to my financial ruin for a while, but another story.
Sure.
Episode number 6, Nicholas Cups podcast.
But minute number 45. We'll get to that. Yeah.
But I mean, I like to ask guests on my show a question at the beginning. What is your definition of an awakened man? But I also want to put that back burner for a second and have you kind of go down the path we've already started on, and give a bit of what makes you an out of the box financial advisor, and then we'll probably circle back to that later.
Well, I think I don't know how out of the box I am. I think that it really,
for regulatory purposes, we are.
Well, so that I'm trying to challenge a few things with as I look forward of where I want my business to go, what kind of advice I think works today and age versus what advice may not have been so great in the past. There's a term, fiduciary responsibility,
right?
That so many people tout. I'm a fiduciary. Like every firm will say, all of our advisors are fiduciaries. We always put our clients' interests first, and that is true to an extent. But where I'm trying to challenge is to ask, are you really? Because when you look at how the model, or I like to say the sandbox that you play in, is designed, there's only so many toys in the sandbox.
Okay.
And those toys include IRAs, 401ks. Those are all set up for tax purposes, and the whole system is designed for employees to participate in it.
Interesting.
Right? So if you're an employee of a big corporate company, you're going to put so much into your 401k, your company's going to match for you. You can only put so much in an IRA. There's a lot of limits there, but it's all to put money away for the future, which is great. And then you only have so many tools, or like say toys in the sandbox, that you can utilize to have that money work for you. So inside of a 401k, you're going to have mutual funds, which are invested in stocks and bonds. They're all what are called registered investment products. And those are the tools that advisors can use, which is great. Those do not include other types of things people can do to earn money.
Right. And so far, that's what I would refer to as the kind of end of the box.
Right. And so the
advice.
reason that most advisors can't think outside the box is because how they charge their fee. So in the beginning, it was commissions. If I'm a stockbroker, I'm your gateway or your gatekeeper to the stock market. This is before online trading. This is in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
You had to call a guy at Merrill Lynch to go buy Disney stock. Like, you couldn't do that on your own. And I would charge you a commission for every time I placed a trade. That's how financial advisors or stockbrokers made money. And then after that, the fee-based model was created. Where
Does that one not exist anymore?
No, it does. Oh wait, the commissions?
The stockbroker kind of deal?
It does. A lot of banks, so advisors at banks still use it.
Okay.
Insurance companies use it, and it's all what are called loads. So they don't necessarily charge you to trade stocks, individual stocks and bonds. Because you can do that on your own, and you can go to like E-Trade, and you might pay a transaction fee for that. But if you're using an advisor, like if you could buy a mutual fund, they have share classes of funds that have commissions that they'll earn for purchasing that fund.
Right.
So yeah, that stuff still exists. I think it's extremely archaic and is not the right thing to do, because you got to stay nimble in this market. I mean, the market moves way faster today than it ever has. And so buying one mutual fund and owning it for 10 years might not necessarily, because you've paid a commission.
Okay.
And you'll have to pay a fee to get out early. That stuff still exists, but it's declining rapidly. So yes, it does. But The biggest component is
By the way, if you are just starting out, and I'm just going to throw out some my archaic knowledge because I haven't been in the world for a while, but if you're just starting out, like the Dave Ramsey kind of idea, just like get emergency fund, get some kind of, it's better than a savings account, get a mutual fund, put in an IRA. That's better than nothing, right?
doing something's better than nothing. Absolutely.
So if somebody's just getting started and they don't have a lot,
Go to Vanguard.
Okay.
Just open an account on Vanguard.
Okay.
That's the easiest and cheapest way.
So you don't need an advisor. Just go online, Vanguard.
Yep.
Sock some money away every month.
Buy the S&P 500 fund.
Okay.
And it's the cheapest one. You'll get exposure to the stock market.
Is there just a transaction fee, no load, right?
There's no transaction fee with Vanguard.
Really?
And their annual expenses are tiny.
Okay, so you're paying an annual expense.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, so it's baked into their performance. So the expense on the S&P 500 index fund is like 10 basis points, I think, or even less than that. So 0.1%.
Mm-hmm.
So if the market goes up 10% one year, that fund will go up 9.9% because 0.1 was taken to pay Vanguard for their ability to manage this product.
So you're not going to see a fee coming out of your bank account. You're going to see, I put $250 in this month.
You'll see $250 in your account.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Doing that systematically like that is the best way to do it. That way it becomes a bill that it's money that leaves your account that you can't spend. Yeah. And that's the best. Yeah. For young people, that's the best thing to do.
And they call it dollar cost averaging, if I remember right. And there's some science to that, but we don't have to get into it. But
right. Well, that's right? just always buy, because it'll go up, it'll go down. When you're young, you want the market to tank.
Yeah. And the time value of money is going to be on your side.
Sure. So the faster you can do that and the more you can put in, the larger that thing will be in the future. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk about the more advanced, that's not the client you're working with typically, right?
No, because I can't make money off that. Right. So I have kids of clients who are that age. And so that's what I recommend doing. They're like, well, send me your statement. I'll give you a what's what. But really, if you just buy one fund, the S&P 500, and you don't look at it for 25 years, you're going to do real well.
Yeah. Historically, right?
Yeah. But there's always a reason not to buy historically. But yeah, over time, if you believe that the United States isn't going to fail in the next 25 years, it's a good investment. So back to kind of how advisors get paid, because then that's where that commission world still exists, is for those young people who don't know what they're doing. They go into their bank, they see a financial advisor in the office, they go talk to them, and the financial advisor says, yeah, start putting $250 a month away into this mutual fund, but they're going to charge you like 5% transaction fee every time.
Every month you're paying on that money.
Every time you buy.
Wow.
So it's when you're $250 a month or whatever you're doing.
So you're immediately way ahead just going to Vanguard.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, just go there. Yeah, you might not have someone to call, but you can call Vanguard. They have advisors on staff.
Well, yeah, and it's the S&P 500.
Who cares?
Yeah,
you're not
super predictable.
If you work for a company and you believe in that company, buy their stock if it's publicly traded. If you like a product, this is one of the things Warren Buffett does. He buys the stocks of the things he uses. Okay. So if you like Apple, buy Apple. Doesn't matter what price it is today. Just buy it and keep buying it.
That's if you have that long-term perspective.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other model that is the most popular today is what's called the fee-based model, and that's a percentage of the assets I manage. So if you are close to retirement, you got $1 million in your 401k. People hire me to manage that $1 million to generate them an income so they don't have to work anymore. And so I'll charge a percentage of that account balance every quarter. It's on an annual basis, but let's call it 1%. So they'll pay me $10,000 a year to give them the income they need. And in that stage of life, it's really important to have an advisor, because generating income consistently is very hard to do. Getting growth is easy. back to our previous point of just buying the S&P 500. As long as you don't change anything, you're going to do okay. Managing downside risk, managing distributions, having that done right and from a tax efficiency standpoint is complicated. So that fee you pay an advisor a lot of times justifies itself just by either one, you don't want to do it yourself because it's a full-time job, but you'll avoid a lot of mistakes by having a professional do it.
Okay.
What makes me different is kind of to circle all the way back around to that, is that fee-based model. I see holes in the fiduciary component to it, because the only tools you have inside of that model are what are called registered investment products. So stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds. That's it. I cannot recommend my clients use some of their nest egg to go invest in a rental property under that model. Because if you had $1 million in your account, I'm charging you 1%. You're going to pay me 10 grand a year to manage that money. If I say, well, it makes a lot of sense for you to take 300,000 of that and go buy 4 rental houses that'll kick off this much income, I can't charge you that percentage on the value of those rental houses because it's not in this system. It's in a different sandbox.
Yeah.
So now my relationship with you went from $1 million to 700,000. So I'm only making 7 grand off you instead of 10 grand. So it's not in my best interest to do that. So that's one reason that.
And when you say my best interest, you're speaking for
financially for my business.
Almost all of the fee-based advisors out there.
Now, the other reason that most advisors don't recommend, that's not the only reason, but that's a reason. And that's probably a reason they don't explore getting to know, if we want to just look at rental properties as an option. They just don't understand it. It's just a different world that they can't ever get paid in. So why would they ever explore that? It's not to say that the traditional investment world is broken or it doesn't, but sometimes you can earn more income in, if you just take this example, real estate, than you can anywhere else. And so a lot of times it makes sense to do that. If all your money's not in an IRA, if you've got some outside of an IRA that you could put into, that makes a lot of sense. Putting money that's in an IRA in a rental house is a nightmare. So that sometimes it's functionally just not possible.
Okay.
But so you have rental properties, you could go invest in a startup. You could become an owner that way. I mean, you've got this nest egg.
But none of that is tax sheltered.
Well, no, it's not tax sheltered, but it's also out of the purview of a financial advisor.
Right.
Like it's just, I'm not a venture capitalist. So it's hard for me to go do this, but I have a client who is in that business and they come to me like, hey, I'm thinking about investing in this company. Can we transfer some money to that? And I'm like, I know nothing. Like, he's like, what do you think? Do you think this sounds like a good investment? I don't know. I don't know anything about that company. I don't know what they do. It's not public, so I can't get that information, but you're way more of an expert about it than I am. So, but it sounds great. And if you're willing to take the risk, let's do it. And so the only way that works from a business standpoint on my side is to charge a flat fee.
Okay.
So just back to that $10,000. Like if you came to me and you had $1 million, half of it in an IRA, half of it in a taxable account that we could play with outside, I'm going to say, okay, here's your net worth. It's $1 million. We're going to assign a fee to that to start. So I usually say about 1%. So I'm going to charge you $10,000 a year, and it doesn't matter where your investments are because you're hiring me to be your money guy. And I think that model removes all conflicts of interest. It just opens you up. And we may never go down the road of real estate or venture capital or wherever, because those are kind of deals or opportunities that come up that apply to only certain people. It depends on your situation, but I at least want the option in case, because life changes, things get in the way, opportunities come up. The main reason I'm looking at real estate is because the bond market is not going to be able to deliver what it used to going forward.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to figure out how can I move my clients' money in a way where it's still earning them a really good income and isn't fluctuating like stocks. That's what bonds used to do, but they're just not. And we don't need to get into that today. But that's what makes me a little different is I see that as the next sea change that needs to happen in the business, and nobody's doing it because it's so easy to just charge a percentage. Because when the market goes up and your account gets bigger, my fee gets bigger.
Right.
So just performance alone gives me a raise, which is great. Like I'm part of the reason you got that performance. So we should both share in that. And on the flip side, if your account goes down, my fee goes down. But I think it's a really fair way to do something. But when you have a client who's got the opportunity to think outside the box, or maybe they want to take some of their money to plow into a business that they are going to run, like they've quit and they're not ready to stop working. And so they're just going to go start a business. They might need some of that money and they need someone like me to help them financially plan for that.
Right.
And so that's where that flat fee is really important in the relationship, where it doesn't put up any barriers. So
so I've heard you on your podcast say something along the lines of your business might be the best investment you can make, or something like that. Do you remember how you say that?
It's just that the business you start is most likely the best investment you'll ever make.
Okay.
Financially, that might not be true because there's more components than just finance.
I love that. You're looking at it a more holistic perspective, not just the bottom line.
It's peace of mind. I mean, what's the point of life? Like, point of life is not to have a big bank account. You know,
that really speaks to my model of, what I, kind of walk my clients through, looking at, impact and freedom in relationships being more important than money. Success, air quotes, financial success without fulfillment isn't success. So, I think core value wise, we're very aligned on that.
Yeah. I mean, and everyone is going to be a little bit different. One thing I like about, one of the many things I like about my wife is before I met her, I was pretty materialistic. I still love things. I like nice cars. I like fancy watches. Like there are things that I enjoy. But that used to be the reason I tried to earn money. It was so I could go buy things. And I think a lot of people are like that.
Did you have a vision board with all sorts of stuff on it?
No, I don't have vision boards. So I need to get into that because they make sense. But when I met her, she is anti-materialistic.
Is she like a minimalist?
No, she just doesn't get satisfaction out of things. She gets satisfaction out of experiences.
Cool.
And that was different for me. I had never considered that. And so I think a lot of people, the reason they want, or their value is, I need to earn more money or I need to have more money, is because of what that money means to them.
Right.
It means they can go buy more shit. And that's never going to be fulfilling.
Yeah.
People think it does, but it doesn't. It's like eating sugar. Like it's immediately gratifying, but then immediately you have remorse right after that. This is, or doing drugs, same thing. Like you get to a point where you need more of it to fulfill itself, and that's not satisfying. So yeah, my vision with helping clients is, or back to that statement of the best investment you can make, it's because of what you'll get out of it. I've met so many people that started a business under the guise of, I would rather fail at trying this than staying where I am working for someone.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And like, once you step out of that and you have that perspective, I think life gets a little bit more enjoyable. The lack of money brings sadness.
Sure.
But the having money doesn't necessarily bring happiness.
Right.
Like, yeah, which is a true statement.
Sure.
Like poverty, I haven't met a really happy poor person, like really happy. There's a lot of crap that they're dealing with because they're poor. But I've met a ton of sad rich people, a lot of sad rich people. So anyway,
that's a good point. Okay. So your ideal client, I would imagine a good fit, I should say, a good fit, client, good fit, is going to be someone who is interested in stuff like business, real estate, who, not that if you have a client who just wants the sandbox stuff, the registered products, not that that's a bad client for you, but I think your ideal person that you would attract and who would be attracted to working with you as a financial advisor would be interested in real estate, business.
It would be more interested in living up to my definition of retirement.
Right.
Like that, having that motto of the moment I'm retired is the day that I stop sacrificing today for some imaginary tomorrow.
Right.
And normally those people are self-employed individuals. There's lots of people that even in the baby boom generation today where they've existed in this traditional sandbox. The first thing I look for is a personality fit. I've gotten to a point in my career where I'm able to afford that.
Right.
I don't work with just everyone. I probably turn away more business than I take because I also don't want to work 100 hours a week because I got all these clients.
Right. You're following your own philosophy.
Exactly. So if it's not a good fit personality wise, it's just not going to work.
Right.
Like, who cares about how much money you make? Like, if you don't enjoy working together, what are you doing? So that's the first thing. But the second one is do you align with that motto?
Right.
And because then I can help you get there. And that's more fulfilling to me, helping someone achieve that, because then life gets better for them.
Right.
And so, but if you are an ideal client, like most of my clients are, in their 60s, they've got this big nest egg, and now we're trying to figure out how to use the tools we've got to make the most out of it. And in certain cases, we can look at things like real estate and other alternative investments. But for the most part, it's really just, if your definition of retirement is to play golf every day, I don't judge that. That's great. Let's figure out how to do that.
Right.
My argument is that if you're a self-employed type, that's probably not going to bring you happiness. What's going to bring you happiness is creating something like a business that is a lasting legacy that you pour your blood, sweat, and tears in, and you get fulfillment out of that.
So if I'm your client and I get this bug for business while I'm working with you, or I've got this bug for business and I'm looking for a financial advisor at the same time, and I choose to work with you because I know your philosophy. You mentioned a little earlier that, my paying your fee, you're able to advise me on that portion of it. So it made me think, like, are you I know you're not a CFO or an outsourced CFO, but can you fill some of that role? Because, as somebody who's started several businesses, I want a CFO right off the bat, but can I get one? No. But if it's a package deal and I can get some CFO-like help from you, is that part of what you do?
It's a good way to describe it. For certain, it really depends on the individual. I think the hardest thing that most advisors struggle with when working with clients is, I think we always feel like if we don't initiate conversation, it doesn't happen. Very, very few clients, it's a unique trait, will actually be the one to treat me like a CFO, where they want to check in a bunch because they've got questions, or a lot of times relationships aren't that complicated. So it's, let's do a quarterly check, or even an annual check is all you really need sometimes. But it just really depends on the situation. I would love to play that role. And I have in the past, but it's a minority. So it's a great way to define it for someone who's trying to start a business and needs a money guy to know what they're doing, what their plan is, and how best to facilitate that financially.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've already gone over all our household stuff. We've already talked about, goals and plans for the retirement registered products here. We're going to take some of this and start a business, and I need your help to set up. I've never done QuickBooks. I need, I've obviously done some budgeting at home, but I've never done this for a business. How do I separate all this stuff? Can you help me with maybe a little bit of a basic financial model, like in all that stuff?
Well, I've never actually nuanced it down that far. That's interesting. I would say that, yeah, under the right circumstance.
Cool.
Because it's all stuff I've done myself. I have my own business. And it's all stuff that most of my guests on my podcast have done. And so if it's not something that I'm necessarily familiar with, like if you decide to use a different accounting software than QuickBooks or any of those, I use QuickBooks. So I'm very well versed in it, and I can help you set it up really fast. Cool. So the setup thing would be easy because it's not something that we would have to do ongoing. I'm not going to be your bookkeeper.
Right.
Like I'm sorry. Like that's just not going to get done. I have a hard enough time doing my own. It's just a different skill set. But I'll help you establish everything. I'll tell you what I did. I'll make sure you do all your filings right. I'll put you in contact with the right attorneys with all that. I have that network set up. So sure. But I would be the quarterback that would reach out, and, I have all my clients give me, I think it's called limited power of attorney, where they've given me permission to talk on their behalf to other professionals. So I can call an attorney back, hey, I have a client. I'm representing them here. They're looking to set up an LLC. Can we do this? And how fast can we do this? And that way they're just off doing their thing with their business, and I can be the one behind the scenes making sure it all gets set up.
So my other job is business coach. And if this was my business coach podcast, I would love to go more in depth with you on that. But I'm afraid we might be losing the husband on fire listeners here. So if you want more information, get a hold of Nicholas Cups, and maybe explore that.
Yeah.
And then maybe even someday have you on the business podcast.
Sure. I would love that.
Cause it's hard for me not to dive into that topic, but I'm like, okay, we got to get back to this husband stuff. All right, cool. So as far as I alluded to earlier, your definition, this is just the question I like to ask all my guests, like, what's your definition? What does that mean to you, awakened man?
That's heavy. I love that term. I draw on my relationship experience. So I'm on my second marriage. I went through divorce. And
how long ago was that?
Divorce 10 years ago this year.
Okay.
And I define that as a man who does not sacrifice who he is, and finds joy in being who he is. Joy, fulfillment, whatever you want to add to that. But if you are sacrificing your principles to make someone else happy, you're not an awakened man. And finding a partner who supports who you are, who admires who you are, is something I didn't have in my first marriage. I was the guy that started giving up on the things he loved to do to seemingly try to please her. Like, I love to golf. Golf takes a long time. It's a 5-hour day. And I eventually played less and less golf because she wanted to do other things. That's not okay. Like, of course, there are going to be times where you've got to make that sacrifice.
Sure.
Great. But to have it be a trend over time, you get into that. I'm not waking up every day doing the thing I love to do. I'm waking up every day doing the thing you love to do.
Right.
So it's on the flip side, it's fine to support her in what she loves to do. But I think awakened man is someone who doesn't sacrifice themselves for someone else, and they're comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
Regardless of the consequence. They're just comfortable doing that.
Yeah. I love it. What for you has been, I don't know if it's the biggest relationship mistake you've ever made, but something in that realm. What's been a mistake or a downtime, a challenging season for you that maybe some guy who's listening, who's maybe there right now, could learn from? Like, how did you describe the situation? How did you get out of it? What did you learn from it?
Well, I mean, we're always making mistakes, right? And then I think if I want to think about the big one, so it really was a retrospective learning from my first marriage. And that was what I just alluded to. I allowed myself to decline for fear that if I didn't, she would leave me. And that, I think, was a toxic trap that I got into personally. And when I decided that my relationship with my first wife needed to end because of something she had done, that was the first time in my life where I'd stood up for myself. And I wish I had done it sooner.
Okay.
And so I would say that, anyone I talk to, buddies that go through relationship issues, like, it's really tough in the moment to stand up for yourself because you usually care a lot about your partner,
right,
regardless of what happened, or you still care about them, and you don't, the fear of losing that or ending that relationship prevents you from making rational decisions. And so the faster you can get to rational decisions, I think the better. And I wish I would have known that, because I could have saved a year of my life. Now, fortunately, with my first wife, we didn't have kids together. I have no idea what to say to someone who has kids looking at separating or risking that, because that's a complexity that I've just learned about by having, my oldest is 5. So in the last 5 years, I've learned about, like, man, I think I would rather just stay in a miserable relationship so they could have some semblance of normalcy. But that's not healthy. So anyway, I don't know where the answer to that is. But from my experience, if you don't have kids, like for me, it was the moment I stood up for myself. I felt better. I felt more mature. Ultimately, it ended in us separating and going our separate ways. But that led me down the road of finding all the things in Jenny that were missing in that first relationship that I didn't realize. I thought I had the perfect girl, and I was like, oh wow, there's a way better version of that person that I had no idea. So anyway, yeah, that's I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, I mean, is part of that you you knew what not to settle on?
Yeah, it's the red flags. I learned early on, because then after that, because I got married young and then got divorced. I was 30, and you're just kind of scared of, you meet someone, you connect, and you start to kind of sacrifice a little bit of your values for theirs. Some personality traits that might not be great. Like, I can get through that. She's really hot, or I like this opportunity, because frankly, it's your only opportunity in the moment, right? You meet someone and you hit it off on a first date, and you see where it goes.
Right.
And it's just like those one little things after another that come up that now are deal breakers for me because of what I went through.
So how do you know where, because compromise is part of a relationship. How do you know where it's one of those things that, not just a compromise, but this is something that's non-negotiable? From your experience, how do you determine that?
Well, that comes down to just you. or if you've got your principles, if you're an awakened man, you've got your principles, you've got your things that bring you joy, you have your life. It's how I'm trying to say this the right way. I think it comes down to how does your partner respond to that? Are they the ones that are going to try to change those things about you?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they admire those things about you? And you might not necessarily share them together, but it makes you who you are. And so if they're trying to change those behaviors always, I think that's tough. I think you're in a difficult position where, and what's the joke? Like every woman tries to change their man, like kind of thing. Like they're always working on their guy, trying to make him a better guy. But I think that's one of the problems I had in my first relationship is there was this, and I didn't know it at the time, but there was this desire to change what I did to bring me happiness, to morph it into, to do what she wanted to do so we could do it together, which is, I think, a fine thing to strive for because ultimately the intent is good.
Right.
But ultimately it made me play golf less. It made me hang out with my friends less. Like it just eventually creeped in where I got to a point where like, shit, we don't do anything I want to do. Right. So I think it really comes down to like how your partner is, how she, in this case, how they view that. And do they honor that or not?
Yeah. So ideally you're defining who you are as an awakened man before you get in a relationship.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like is your experience between your first and your second.
But if you're in one, so one of the things that I think is a byproduct of, go back to my first marriage, if I had I been able to stand up for myself earlier on and just said, these are not things I'm willing to compromise. Like, this is who I am. These are the things I like to do. And we need to make time for me to do those things. I don't need to only do those things, but I need them. Like hang out with the guys, whatever gives me fulfillment.
But you learned that lesson because of your experience.
Sure.
If you would have known that going into it, you could have done that.
Yeah, but I think the big thing there is the fear. There's the reason I think most, at least for me, and I could probably speak for a lot of guys, is by putting your foot down and just saying, I cannot compromise this much. You're drawing a line.
Sure.
And then how your partner responds to that, and if she comes back and says, that's no good for me either, well, now we have a constructive conversation to have that may lead to separation.
Right.
Which is a good thing. Right. Because you're not going to compromise who each of you is. I was scared to have that because it could lead to separation. I didn't want that.
Yeah. It's a huge insight.
It's ballsy, but I think an awakened man is one that is able to do that, whether it's through experience or not. Like they get to a point where that is more important than pleasing someone else. You still want to please your spouse, clearly, right?
Yeah. Well, all the guys. So that makes me think of. I think you're absolutely right. And I'm reflecting through like all of these guys that I've worked with that are in marriage, right? And I'm very upfront with them. There's no guarantee that she's going to respond the way we hope. She might not, because there's a consequence to standing up for yourself, right? And however she reacts is the consequence. And it may end up with separation, divorce, or it may end up with, now you guys are talking about the real issues. Now you guys are working on the real stuff. Now you guys have an opportunity to become fully alive and fulfilled and all you want to be as individuals, and see if your relationship is a complement to that. But you'd never know that if you keep playing that game of, just, giving up your what's important to you, what's your values, your, slicing off a little bit more every day.
Right. Yeah, that's well said. It's it just comes down to fear. You know, it ultimately the hard, I think the hardest part is you just don't know what else is out there. Like you don't know what the alternatives are.
Right.
So like I didn't know Jenny was out there when I was married to my first wife. Had I known that, it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah.
But it's just, but I also, through that experience, looking back, I can say, I don't believe in soulmates. I believe that with 350 million people in this country, that cannot be true. The law of large numbers, just, there's going to be a lot of women who, just through their personality traits, I'm going to be more connected to. That's just my own belief. And so there's a huge spectrum there. Like there are some that like we're just going to be best friends. And then there's others that maybe I'm only physically attracted to. You know, there's a spectrum there. And I think it's trying to figure out where on that spectrum your spouse is. But that's always hindsight. Like you can't. So it comes back to your principles, I think. At least that's what I learned.
Good. So you touch on something that I think is so important, and I really want to drive it home that if you're, I'm talking to the listener, if you're in the place where you're struggling in your relationship and that fear, you identify with Nicholas that fear is the holdback. Okay, yeah, I get it. I need to stand up to my wife. I need to like stop giving up what's important to me. I need to reconnect with the things that make me me, because I feel like I've lost myself, but I'm afraid of what that consequence might be. If there's that guy listening right now, you've already kind of, I think, inspired by your story. For you, it turned out okay. You ended up with Jenny and you have a great relationship and kids and the whole thing, but you didn't have that guarantee back then. When you were in that place, like, is there anything else that comes to mind? Like, what does that guy need to know?
Well, really, so I have a friend who mutually decided to separate from his wife through no fault of either of them. They just got to a place where like, we're not meant to be, we're going in different directions. And he really struggled with that for a while. And he and I grew close because I would kind of help him through that. Like, here was my experience. But for me, it was easy it was not easy. It was easier because there was an act done that destroyed our relationship by her. And so I can place blame very easily.
It made it less hard to do what you needed to do.
It still was destroying, but it also made it look like, well, there's got to be a better alternative.
Sure.
Right. So, so yeah, I mean, for someone who they're just either growing apart, man, that's really difficult, I think, to stand up for yourself, to know that I'm not happy going through whatever this is. And as I look in the future, the trend that I see is only going to lead to me to be less and less happy. To see that, and then to stand up for yourself, and say, I need to make myself happy, because no one's going to make you happy. You got to do that yourself. And if you're always sad and always looking at the future in an eye rolling, is this my life? Is this my life?
Another day.
Right. Of course we all have bad days, but the thing that Jenny and I think, we go through our ups and downs, just like anyone, but we always come back to our vision of the future always includes us together. So like when you go through big arguments, or you go through times where one person hurts another, it's never about separating, and that fear isn't there. Like, we'll work through it. Sure. Because we have this huge foundation and we support each other in what we're all about and what makes us happy. And so that was what was very different about the two relationships. And why, I think my relationship with Jenny is going to last a very, very long time. So yeah, I would say this, if you're just sitting there struggling in your relationship with your spouse, one, go talk to someone about that, obviously, talk to you about that. But I think what fascinated me about getting you on my podcast was this awakened man idea or theme or whatever you want to call it that you're creating, this movement, is incredible because it gives a support group for guys who are struggling. Because I think a lot of times, at least when I went through it, I had some family, but then you can't really tell your family about all the things because what happens if you get back together? Right. Like if you tell your family, if your wife cheated on you, like, are they going to ever forgive her for that? Even though you might have, like, it makes it really complicated. Sure. So I think a lot of times, I especially felt like I was on an island for a long, long time.
Yeah. I think a lot of guys can relate to that.
Yeah. And so finding a support group of guys who are going through it, but then having a coach or a quarterback, and I'm talking about you, to help facilitate the right conversations. Right. I think a lot of times guys like to be pissed together, and that's not constructive. It's fun, especially when beers are involved. Right. But it's having a constructive conversation. Is very important.
Yeah, and maybe giving you the hard thing to do rather than the just commiserating.
Yeah, but then also following up.
Yeah.
Giving the hard thing to do isn't going to get done because it's hard. You're more apt to not do it. Yeah. But having examples of, people you can go to that have gone through a similar situation is huge. Yeah. I was on an island for a long, long time, and that's partly why it took a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, speaking to the listener again, I think, if you're in that spot where you are feeling that fear of, something's got to change, but now I get it. I know I need to do this. I need to stop. I need to put my foot down, and I need to reconnect with what makes me, so I can be fully alive as a man, and have that conversation with the wife. Your friend that you mentioned that did the separation, that was mine and Tanya's story. We looked at each other. We're like, I guess we're just like growing apart, and we couldn't figure out how to, go. We couldn't see it going together. And so we had that conversation. We never actually physically separated because our 3 kids, we didn't want to make that decision quickly. But it was in the plan, and somewhere between execution and plan and execution, we found what we needed, which is now what we teach couples. So just to give another, when you make that stand, you can, it's going to go one of a few ways,
Well, but it's not about her.
Right.
Like, it's making the stand is about you. Right. And it comes back to only you can make yourself happy.
Right. And that's the bottom line. Yeah. You got to go there
before you can go anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And so, which is a very healthy thing. And that's why I think going through couples counseling, doing it together, where step 1 might be, you guys got to go figure out who you are individually. Yeah. And step 2 would come back and say, okay, we found ourselves. Mm-hmm.
Do we still fit together?
Do we still? Yeah. Is that kind of the correct? Sure, yeah. All right. So
yeah, and sometimes, a couple options. Sometimes you're gonna say, okay, yeah, we don't fit together. Confirmation. We it's just like in this. Sometimes it's like, oh, you know what? You being you and me being me, I still like you, and I want a future together, and that's another option. Right. So just to not every one of these take a stands ends in divorce and a new relationship. But sometimes they do.
But all of them, taking a stand always results in a better life. Always.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, I think there's some steps to do to ensure that.
Right.
And one you mentioned is like, get connected, get somebody, a mentor, a coach, a counselor, and get into a support group, get into other guys that are thinking the same thing. Like we have the Awakened Man community, awakenedmancommunity.com will get you there. So if you don't have another option, there you go. The other thing is, there's sort of an instruction manual I've written, the Relationship Secrets Black Book. So that's a resource available. I'll make that available in the show notes. But, there's a manual for this.
Well, yeah. And what I mean is that the result of you being successful and taking a stand, if divorce is the result, you will be happier.
Yeah.
If staying together is the result, you will be happier.
Yeah.
It always leads. Someone who takes a stand, unless they're an ass, it always leads to positivity. And I think for me, I was only looking at the risk of thinking that divorce was a negative,
right?
Which, because it kind of was in that perspective. But the minute you're able to step outside that, or at least trust in the fact that if you figure out who you are again and what makes you happy,
right,
you're going to be a better spouse for one. If you decide to stay together, better father. But if you decide to separate, you're just going to be a better human,
right?
And so when you decide or you meet someone new, as I did, it's easier to vet them because all of those personality traits that you left show up immediately on potential suitors.
Yeah.
And then you can just say, nope, I am not, I know what that is.
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with that. And then when you find someone who doesn't have those, you're like, oh, you exist.
Yeah.
So then it makes it a lot easier to dive into.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that worked out really well for you.
Yeah.
I think the key to it is the focus needs to be about fulfillment and being the best version of yourself. Whether the current person or the next person recognizes that, you can't control that, but you will be the best version of yourself and you'll have a better relationship regardless.
Yeah. But I also think that there's an element of work there. Like you're never done with that.
Right.
Right. So
good point.
like, I think it's the desire to be better.
Yeah. Always be growing.
Not sacrificing that journey. And to have someone who supports you in that journey, I think is what we all look for.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of couple struggles are rooted in that, in the derailing of that, whether it's the husband or the wife that is the one. And my guess is that, I'm not a relationship expert, but my guess is that a lot of the intent is good, but it just, through natural human interaction, you pull one way or you pull the other way, and it
happens.
Coming back to the middle of having a process to do that is important. But the work, like always having the attitude of I want to be someone better, is important.
Absolutely. Working on yourself. Good. I think that's great. Before we wrap up, is there any last word of advice for husbands from your experience? Or what are you taking into the future? What's your advice for yourself?
Strip clubs.
So how did that fit in?
It usually doesn't. No. What advice, or what was the question?
Just if there's maybe from the perspective of what advice are you taking with you, whether you heard it somewhere or you from your own experience, what are you taking with you into the future?
Well, what I just said, it's that I am working on me always.
Good.
I'm trying to be, one thing Jenny always helps me with is to be present. So I'm futuristic thinking. Like I did all those personality exams. It always comes out. I just live in the future.
Yeah.
Which is at the detriment of the present.
Sure.
Where Jenny is 100% in the present, and which is why if I let her run the show in terms of getting the kids some places on time, we would always be late.
Yeah.
And so I'm always planning, like, we got to get out the door by this time,
Yeah.
and she's playing with them always and just totally involved with them. And so she's helping me
To balance.
explore that,
Mhm.
well, to be more present, because
Sure.
that's a good thing, like,
Yeah.
to find that balance of being on time and being present.
You guys balance each other well, obviously.
Yeah, but it's a struggle
Mm-hmm.
because I think when we get rooted too much in what we think is correct, when our egos take over,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
that's where we have our most contentious times.
Mm-hmm.
She gets mad at me for, always having to be on time, and I get mad at her for always being late. So
Nobody can relate to this.
no, those are not normal personality traits at all. But I think it really comes down to, like, letting go of that ego, which is one thing she's helping me do, because she's very good and trained at doing that. Just let go of that, and then we can come together and figure it out. But, yeah, the thing I'm working on that of, I felt like I was scarred, and I carried a lot of pain with me from my first marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't totally healed when I met Jenny. I just happened to meet her when I did. And,
Sure.
And that's always been, like, I find myself sometimes with Jenny getting back into that routine of sacrificing
The old stuff, yeah.
cause that's kind of that was my relationship routine. That's what I knew. And so, having someone who supports, like, said, you need to go golfing. Like, that's really important to you, or you need to do these things. Like, let's figure out how to make time for you to do that. And the same with her, like, she needs to do certain things. Like, she goes out once a month with her girls group. And so I do that every month. Let's figure that out.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So little things like that, I think, it's just finding someone who will support you in your journey to be better.
Yeah.
I think to sum it up.
That's good. And I love the idea of being present. It's good that you have that tension between you guys, those differences. So I think differences are what make relationships exciting and passionate and frustrating and maddening. But also,
That's a good reminder. I like that, because sometimes we're both alphas too, which is tough because we're both alphas and we're both in sales. So I think our biggest contentions are trying to sell each other on who is correct.
Sure.
So, which is never productive.
Yeah. But I love the idea of being flexible. I mean, I think part of being awake man is really embracing that presence. Like, I think it's a good balance to have the future mindset, but to have the skill of right here, right now, I'm here. I'm with you. I'm present. That's a huge thing.
The one thing too that we let slip a little bit, but we had this rule, like, Jenny hates, like, we were dating, and, I was really active in social media when we were dating, because I had come out of a relationship, and social media is kind of the only place to meet people now. Like, it was just, and so I was really active on social media, and we were on a date, and, I was checking on the date, and she just looks at me. She's like,
really?
I can leave if you want to continue this date with Facebook.
Right.
Or you can put that away, and
Good
we can
for her.
actually, and I'm like,
that's an awakened woman right there.
she is very much so. Yes. I'm striving to be more like her in the positive sense of that. But,
Sure.
but it was one of those. And so we had this rule of when she gets home with the kids, cause I'd take them to daycare, and then she brings them home, cause we both work. Our phones go off.
Nice.
We tend to, the pendulum tends to swing on that. But
Sure.
I know that we're most connected as a family when like my phone, if I flip it over, it goes silent. And so when they walk in the door, I flip it over. She'll put her phone's usually off anywhere. She's not attached to her phone like I am. But then it's just us, like the outside world isn't infiltrating our time together as a family. And so we're not always great at that, but that was our goal. And we're working on, like, being really diligent about that and so that's part of her, like, that was her idea of,
Yeah.
because I'm addicted to my phone, just like most people are. Is like I just have this need to see what's happening, and I catch myself while I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah,
Like,
it's just habitual.
I'm not getting anything out of it. In fact, I'm scrolling through the same Instagram post I looked at 5 minutes ago. Nothing's changed.
Yeah. So put the phone down. That's a good tip.
Yeah, I think technology. That's the struggle today. We didn't really have, like in my first marriage, like the iPhone came out in 2007 or 8. And, it was like a year later, our relationship blew up. It had nothing to do with
Blame the iPhone.
It had nothing to do with that. But the point is like in my relationship, my first relationship, we were married for 4 years. We didn't have that technology come between us.
Different world, yeah.
Right. Where now you do.
Yeah. You have to be mindful of it. You have to put intentions around it, especially as a family.
Sure. Yeah. Like our kids don't participate in it yet. But yeah, it's scary, and it's addicting. It's a drug. So yeah, we're trying to figure out how to, that's one of the things I'm really working on, is like how to just forget about my phone for a while, like how to not feel like I'm connected. 'Cause also as an advisor, the market opens at 9:30 Eastern time, which is 6:30 this time. So from 6:30 to 1, it's open, and I need to be kind of versed in what's happening. So I'm constantly checking. That's the number one thing I check on, is like, how's the market doing today? Or what's the news of economics? But after 1 o'clock, I don't have to, but it's pretty fun. So yeah, it's,
well, I think we can all relate to that, and probably all need to take note of that. So I definitely am.
For sure.
Well, Nicholas, I appreciate your time here. I appreciate the experience sharing you've given. This has been good and rich, because I think guys are getting a double whammy. Some really good relationship, husband application, some really good financial application. Maybe I'm assuming there's been a few things that haven't been heard before. And in the financial world, and that's even an option. Like a guy like you is an option, and I'm really excited that my audience gets to hear that. So I appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Just Google my name. My company's Cups Wealth Management. My podcast is the Nicholas Cups Show. My ego runs through that really fast. I've thought about trying to figure out a different name for those things, but it's just me. It's what I do. I'm the guy. So. You just Google my name, and I'm in the top. All those things will show up right at the top of Google.
And it's 2 P's, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's 2 P's, not like the drinking glass. So it's CUPPS.
Cool.
But yeah, so Cups Wealth Management, or the Nicholas Cups Show. All my contact information is up there.
Yep. Cool. And we'll have links to that in the show notes here.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.